Story where I'm going to compliment myself as modestly as I can, of course. Okay, so one of my patients contacted me and she was having diarrhea after her surgery, and I said there's a bunch of things you can do, but I said job number one these days is, if you get a significant diarrhea, is to see your doctor and make sure that you do not have the bacterial antibiotic-associated diarrhea called Clostridia difficile. Clostridia difficile. Clostridia difficile is an example of some of those new awful super bugs that you hear about on TV. And they talk about how they've adapted, they're growing, they're coming to get you, they're knocking on the front door, there's dangerous bugs out there, don't go out. You know, now you go to the grocery store, you know, they have the wipers so you don't touch the shopping cart where somebody else has touched it because could have bad bugs. Well, there actually are some really terrible, scary, dangerous, and deadly germs, and one of them is Clostridia difficile. And so in talking to this patient, I said make sure you don't have that. It's a possibility. Our patients can get C. diff, and this lets me bring up something else that's new in the area of research, and that's the association with your medicine that you take, the Prilosec and Clostridia difficile. Now, Prilosec is taken by millions of people, and millions of people do fine with it, but it is a powerful antacid. So when you take Prilosec, the acid in your stomach goes down. And for lots of people who sustain acid reflux, that really helps. It's life-saving, and there are literally millions of people taking that every day, and just the companies love it. It's one of the most, if not the most, prescribed drugs, right up there with Xanax. And you know, if you had the, that's right, if you had the Xanax and Prilosec concession for the United States, that'd be it. Now, but the problem of turning down the acid is you're changing the lining of your gut to make it different than what kind of God really intended. So without any acid in the stomach, the research now suggests you have a slightly increased risk of getting the Clostridia difficile over the long term. So the first thing I told her is go see your doctor, make sure you don't have C. diff. She went to see her doctor, bright, intelligent, good internist. He said, there's no chance you have C. diff. And of course, as a physician, you should never say that. But so she said, well, my surgeon said it's possible. And he said, nope, no way. You're young and healthy, otherwise you don't have C. diff. It's just a bug. She said, my surgeon really wants to be checked before I do these other things. And so she was checked, and she did have C. diff. And so she called me the other day, in fact, yesterday, to let me know. And I said, is it all right if I share this experience of where I was correct one time? So she said yes, and she's going to email us. But so remember, number one, that C. diff is out there. We had a very prominent lawyer from Nebraska who had my surgery, and he was sick for months. His son was a doctor, and they kept calling me and didn't get checked for C. diff, even though I mentioned it. Finally did, and he was hospitalized with this very significant infection with Clostridia difficile. So be alert. If you get some diarrhea and it passes, no big deal. But if it worsens, remember that Clostridia difficile is out there. You know, with your business, you come in contact with a lot of patients. You might come in contact with somebody who's contaminated with that. So be alert if that doesn't improve. Clostridia difficile is out there. Now, having said that, the majority of our patients obviously do not have that dangerous bug. And so there's some kind of common, simple things you can do if you get some diarrhea after our surgery. One is eat yogurt to put the good, healthy bacteria back in the gut. You can add some fiber, eat a healthy diet, and then review your diet history with me. So we get people who call up and say, I've got diarrhea, and I say, what are you eating? And they'll say cheese and eggs and barbecue chicken and you know, a lot of heavy foods. And again, remember that our surgery interferes with the digestion and absorption of fat. And so when you eat fatty, greasy meals, oftentimes you'll get the equivalent of a fatty intolerance, and a lot like if you'd taken the Ally or Xenical, you'll have kind of greasy, diarrheal, and sometimes foul-smelling bowel movements. So you have to be cautious and pay attention. So with that, we recommend, number one, if you have significant diarrhea, more than a couple of days, more than a few times, make sure you get checked to be sure you don't have C. diff, because that's a deadly disease that's out there now. The second thing is, most of the time, we can fix it in my patients with some pretty simple interventions, including taking some healthy food, telling me what you're eating. Now, the other rare problem is that we just bypass way too much. Okay? Remember that about 1 person out of 100, in attempting to help them lose weight, the surgery is so powerful that they lose too much weight. Okay? And if that happens, remember, that's, first of all, it's a terrible tragedy. I feel awful if I have bypassed too much and you get too thin. Sorry, sorry, sorry. On the other hand, that's my goal, is to make you lose massive amounts of weight, and you can't precisely know how much of a bypass will make somebody perfect the year later when they tend to stop their weight loss. So we guess, I guess at the time of surgery how much to bypass. My track record of guessing is maybe one of the best in the world, but still there are people who get too thin, and there are tragic patients who don't lose enough. Remember that if you're suffering diarrhea that doesn't get better, the C. diff is not present, the foods, remember the possibility that maybe there's just too much of a bypass. That would be a terrible complication, but remember the nice thing about this bypass, in contrast to the Roux-en-Y, is we could fix it. It would take only about 30 minutes. I would apologize, I'd feel bad that you had that, but I would feel happy that, God forbid that you need it, we can fix it in short order. So if you have long-term problems with diarrhea, problems with eating, particularly excessive weight loss, remember that could be too much of a bypass. Not C. diff, not just your eating habits, but just the fact that the surgery itself was more powerful than you need. So keep those things in mind, and remember to call me if you have any trouble. So that's kind of the overview on diarrhea.